Hi everybody, it's Matthew here from Bead Spider. Today is the first in a series of 3 where I'm going to show you how to make some awesome rainbow themed jewellery. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to make this super cute little pair of beaded earrings using a technique called brick stitch. It's a nice, easy beginner project that will introduce you to the basics of the stitch if you've never done it before. I'm going to be using Miyuki size 11 Delica beads. I'm going to use the same 8 colours for each of the 3 rainbow projects. I have 5 grams of each colour, which is more than enough to complete all 3 designs. If you've never seen my tutorials before, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. When we're starting our brick stitch design, we need to pick a row that's going to work as the foundation of our design. From here, we can weave back and forth, adding rows, and then once we've finished doing that, we can come back and start adding rows to the opposite side. Start by cutting yourself about 1.5 meters of thread and sticking a beading needle on one end. To start our design, we need to pick up the first 2 beads of our first row. In this instance, they're both going to be lilac. Holding them in place, we're going to slide our thread all the way through the beads until we're about 30 centimeters from the end. At this point, hold your thread nice and tight and pass through both beads again in the same direction. This will lock them in place, ready to continue. Once we pull it tight, you'll see they're not quite sitting side by side. You can see there's a little bit of thread just here. Once we pass through both beads again, all the way through, and through the second one as well, you'll see that they start to sit much neater side by side, securing them really neatly. At this point here, it's time to start adding the next beads in our ladder row. We'll pick up our 3rd bead, which is a blue one, and with our thread coming out this side, we're going to loop around and through this same bead again to come out from where we started. So taking the needle in here, pull it all the way through to lock that bead onto the top. Now with our thread coming out of the bead below, we need to bring ourselves back to the end bead. So let's pass through this same bead we just added once more, all the way until we're coming out from the very, very end of it. At this point, we'll now pick up the next bead in our row. We're exiting from this side, so again, we'll pass into this side, pull it all the way through so that it sits nicely on top of the bead below. We'll pass back into this bead again to bring ourselves to the end of our stitch. Next, we'll take a light blue bead and we'll repeat the process again. I'll pick up a green bead and into this bead below. Now I'm going to repeat this process until the end of the row. If we look back at our pattern, we'll see that we need to extend the length of this next row. To do that, we're going to pick up 2 beads here and we'll start working in brick stitch. You'll notice that there's tiny little bridges of thread joining each of the beads. We're going to thread underneath those and lock our beads against them. So we'll pick up 1 red bead and 1 orange bead, pass underneath that thread bridge and pull it all the way tight. Careful to avoid the thread bridge, we're going to pass back up through this second bead in the row. It doesn't matter if it comes a little bit loose. As you pull it tight, it will lock it nicely into position. We'll add our next bead, and just as before, we're going to pass underneath this little thread bridge. Take your needle very gently, trying not to pierce the thread, through that little gap, pull your thread all the way tight and then pass back up, avoiding the thread bridge, into the very same bead. Once you've got it sitting nice and tightly, pick up your next bead, pass under the thread bridge, pull all the way through, and back up through the very same bead. Be sure to pull them tight so that they lock nice and neatly together. You'll notice that as you start adding more and more beads to this row, it will continue to get neater and neater. We're going to repeat this process all the way down this next row. To create our desired rainbow shape, we're only going to add this one last bead here to the very end. This is going to become the last bead of this row. We'll pass back up it just as before. As you can see, we've just added this bead just here. We need to now reduce the size of our row to sort of bring it into position to where we can add these beads just here. The way we do that is coming out of this bead, we'll go down and into the next bead and then just follow along the path until we come out of this blue bead here. We'll pass down the adjacent delica bead, pulling our thread all the way through, and now up through the bead beside. Now that we're here, we need to add a bead here and a bead here. So much like how we added on an extra bead at the end here, we're going to do the very same thing here to extend one to be above here and one to be above the opposite side as well. We'll pick up one purple and one blue under the thread bridge of the following beads. Pull it all the way through and up through the second bead that we just added. Now we continue working in brick stitch until we're one bead from the end. Now that we've reached the end, there's no thread bridges after, but we still need to add one bead beyond this one here. That's easy to do. We're going to pick up one little red bead and thread under the previous thread bridge that we already went through when we added this orange bead. So you can see just here, there's a nice little thread bridge there. It'll just sit ever so nicely in position beside that orange bead, right where we want it to be. Pull it tight, and there you go. Now we continue to our next row. Again, we need to extend the end here, so we'll pick up one red bead and one orange, and we're going to go underneath the first thread bridge. Now thread back up through that second bead. There we are, and now we're in position to continue working in brick stitch along this next row. Now that we've reached the other end of our row, we need to start working backwards. We're getting towards the center of our little rainbow earring, so we kind of need to make rows that will create a straightening pattern. So even though we've been graduating upwards before, this one, it's going to be down again. So we'll pick up two beads and pass through that little thread bridge below. Pull it tight all the way through, hold it nice and firm, and pass back up through that blue bead again. And we're ready to continue. So we finished the middle section of our rainbow here. We need to start tapering it back down onto this opposite side. So that means we need to do a row reduce on to begin this row. Just like usual, we'll pick up two beads, but this time, instead of passing through the first thread bridge, we're going to pass through the second thread bridge between this orange and yellow bead. As we pull that tight, they're going to sit roughly in position, but not quite neat yet. To get them to sit nice and neatly, what we're going to do is go back up through that orange bead, which will fix him into position, like so. But you can see that red bead isn't quite sitting right yet. So what we'll do, we'll pass into that red bead, take our thread around, and without going under any thread bridges or anything, we're going to just pass back up into that same orange bead. So as you pull that tight, you'll see it locks that little red bead and that orange bead nice and tightly to each other so that they sit beautifully in position. And now we can just continue working as we have done before. You'll notice I hold my thread nice and tight behind my finger. That helps me to keep a nice firm tension while I'm working. So to make my rainbow look symmetrical, I need to make this row here match exactly to this row here. Just like before, I need to add one bead here where it doesn't look like there's a thread bridge. So just to repeat that again, I'll pick up one bead of the right color, hold my thread nice and tight, and I'm going to go underneath the thread bridge between these two beads just here below, this blue one here and this lilac-y one, purple. Go through that thread bridge, pull it all the way through, and pass back up into that same bead that we just added. Pull it nice and tight. But now we need to add another bead to sit below this one. So how are we going to do that? We're going to use a ladder stitch to stitch it on just like we did on our base row. So I'll pick up one purple bead. I'm exiting from this side, so holding it nice and tight. I'll pass into that bead so that my thread is coming out the same side again, and then back down into that bead once more to lock it into position. Now obviously my thread is pointing back in towards itself, and I need it to be on this side over here. So I'll just pass back up into this bead just here that I needed just before. So now that I'm coming out just here, this is where things can become a little confusing if you don't know what you have to do next. It's the trickiest part of this whole little piece, but I'm going to show you exactly what to do to make it really easy for you. We're going to start working now in brick stitch, but towards this outer edge, off the edge of where we're currently going. I'll fill these two beads in first, which is nice and easy. I'll do it exactly the same as though I was extending one of the ends of the row. So I'll pick up the two beads, the one that will sit here and the one that will sit there, either side of this bead which I'm currently exiting. For this point here, it's two of our blue beads. I'll hold my thread nice and tight, and I'll pass underneath that little thread bridge one towards the end. See that? Just pass through there and pull it through. I'll pass through the second bead that I added, and that will have them sit nicely on top of the previous row. Like so. From here, I can add my next two beads to make it match to this row just here. So first I'll pick up one purple bead. I don't have a thread bridge to go under, so I'll go under the same bridge as before, through there, pull it all the way through, and pass up that one little bead just there. And now we'll add on that last bead using a ladder stitch. So pick up one more purple bead, hold your thread tight, and pass through this previous bead in the same direction as before. Align your two beads and hold it tight. Pass down into this bead again and up into the one before. We'll now pass down the first blue bead, up the second one, and that's going to bring us back into position to continue making our little rainbow. And now I'll add my next blue bead. You'll notice that these two beads aren't really joined to each other at the bottom. So I'll go back up this bead here, and as though we've reduced a row, we'll go down this one here, and then back up this bead that we just added. And now we have a perfectly neat little place for us to finish off this row in brick stitch. At this point, we need to do another row reduction. So in case you don't remember, the way we do that, we're going to pick up the first two beads that we're going to need. One orange and one red. We'll skip that first thread bridge and pass underneath the second one. Right there. Pull it all the way through. Pass up the orange bead. Down into the red bead, and then back up and across into the orange bead without passing through any other threads or anything like that. Pull it tight, and they'll sit nicely side by side. And let's continue with brick stitch. Now that we've reached this point, we need to just add our final row. It doesn't start up here, it starts one bead lower. So like before, we need to weave down the next bead along and up through that first orange one. That will put us into position to add 4 little red beads along this edge. So first we weave down the red one, back up through the orange one, and now we can add on our next 4 beads. There we go. And that's one side of our rainbow completely finished. Now all I've got to do is just weave this thread in. So I'll pass down the bead beside. There's a couple of ways that you can do this, but I'll show you the quick and easy method. Just weave down into the middle of your rainbow piece until you're somewhere around about here. So I think this spot ought to do. What I'm going to do now to seal this little thread off is to just go from this bead here up into this bead, through there, and back again to do a little circle. So I'll go out of this green bead, up into the yellow, all the way through, pull it tight, and go back down into that green bead that I was just exiting. Pull it tight. I'll do that thread path once more, so up into the yellow, except maybe this time I'll go down into the yellow beside. Pull that tight, back into this same yellow, pull that tight, and now I'll just go through this one more orange little bead just here, and by going around in that circular motion, sort of locks your thread in place. Bring in a nice sharp pair of scissors, get it as close as you can to the beads, and cut. And there you go, completely hidden. So now that I've completed my first side, I'm going to take my needle and reattach it to my tail thread here. Once it's on there, I'm going to just weave around, adding on all of the additional rows that are required to make the two sides match exactly. And there we are, all finished. Now all I have to do is weave this thread back in and cut off any excess. Once I'm at that point, I'm going to attach my findings. Now there's just one step left. All I have to do is attach my ear wire to the top of my little rainbow here. The way I'm going to do that is by opening up this very small, very fine jump ring, and I'm going to thread it into that centralmost bead in the red section at the top of my rainbow. Now you can see I've got this jump ring that's only 3 millimeters in size. I'm going to open it up so that I can thread the top of my earring onto it. See how there's just a tiny little opening right there? And if I use my fingers, I can just turn it to open it up. I'll just take my jump ring through that middle bead there. There it is on the middle of my rainbow. I'll take my ear wire finding and I'll just thread that on there as well. And now I can close this jump ring just using my fingers and gently bend it closed like that there. See that? And that will just complete it. Now all you've got to do is make the matching pair and start wearing them. I hope you've enjoyed this part of my rainbow jewelry tutorial. If you haven't seen the other 2 videos, make sure you pop on over and give them a watch as well. Also, give this little video a like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.